Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Hello, and thank you for listening. I appreciate that, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, whether you listen via ProgressiveVoices.com. We air weekdays on both of those entities, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, 7 to 8 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Thank you so much. Also, of course, those of you who listen via podcast, yeah, we're there too. So if you listen live on one of those two entities and you're like, wait a minute, the podcast thing's kind of convenient in case I miss it. Voila. Trying to serve all who can handle 44 and a half minutes of yours truly spitting about politics in and around Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and throughout the United States. Thank you so much. RonShowATL.com is the website if you ever feel like you need to go back and check up on some of the notes that I have throughout the show, because I do that. Show notes, as always, I cite my sources at RonShowATL.com. You can also follow us on your preferred social media platforms at RonShowATL. Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads. Did I miss any? Not on Pinterest. This article caught my attention because I think about this actually all the time. When I say this, I mean traffic, vehicles, cars. Remember when we were kids? I know I remember this. Before turning 16, I could not wait to get my driver's license, to have my own car, to get to jam to my own tunes on cassette, baby. Back in the 90s. Did I have a CD player? No, I didn't. Not early on. Not the first couple of cars, for sure. Anyway, to jam to my own tunes on the way to school. I lived in a community that didn't have a high school. We had to go to the neighboring community to go to school. And you were cool if you got to drive your own car to school or could ride with friends to school. That was cool too. It was okay. It was, next tier. It wasn't as cool as having your own car, but it was next tier. We didn't teach each other about ride sharing back then either. That's something that maybe we could discuss on another day. But riding the bus was kind of like you were not going to be running for class office if you were riding the bus to school, that's for sure. Because, how are you going to navigate getting on the bus, backpack, oh yeah, and your campaign posters? I digress. I just remember before turning 16, how much I was excited about the idea of being free to take to the open road, to have my own vehicle, to set the thermostat on the air conditioning to what I wanted it to be. I'm not even sure my first car had air conditioning now that I think about it. The old K car, it was a two-door. It was red, but it was kind of faded red by the time I got it. Anyway, remember how romantic that all seemed to us? And we still kind of get marketed as if this is a romantic notion, taking to the open road, and we fall in love with the TV commercials with the intuitive dashboards now, and all of the bells and whistles, the self-parking and the completely glass-top roofs. We just get romanticized with whatever it is about having a vehicle and taking to the open road. And yet, at the same time, what we don't really ever stop to consider are the hidden costs of having a car, owning a vehicle, driving, being stuck in traffic. Living in Atlanta since 2018, I've come to realize, and actually before that, I lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for 11 years. Traffic is not much better there, believe it or not. A lot less road, a lot less highway, just as much traffic. Anyway, as I sit in traffic all the time with nothing to occupy my mind except how miserable it is sitting in traffic all the time, I just wonder what happened to that 16-year-old kid who was so looking forward to having his own car and being on the road whenever he wanted to, going where he wanted. Well, obviously, the going where we want part is definitely out when you're an adult. You're not going where you want, you're going where you got to. You're going where life tells you got to go. But we don't think about the hidden costs. We don't think about the time consumed. In Metro Atlanta, I think about this all the time too. Because we're so stuck in traffic, getting to and from work. If you are driving, specifically if you're driving by yourself or if you're not a passenger with someone else, that time you spend in traffic is not your time. You're not even getting compensated for it, really. Especially if you're an hourly employee. Do you get to clock in when you get in the car to head to your job? If not, that is not your time. That is time that you are giving to your occupation without your occupation paying you. J. Scott Truby at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote a couple days ago that Georgia ranks pretty poorly when it comes to the hidden cost of car ownership, according to Bankrate. They did a study that finds that Georgia is the most expensive state in the country for the hidden costs of owning a vehicle. Georgia's number one, and not just in the college football preseason poll. Go Dogs. J. Scott Truby writes, the prices of new vehicles are enough to give many consumers sticker shock, but one report lists Georgia as the state with the highest hidden costs for owning an automobile. Bankrate says Georgia leads the nation in so-called hidden costs, including the cost of car insurance, taxes, fuel, and maintenance, with drivers of new vehicles paying on average. Are you sitting down? Well, of course, you're in traffic. With drivers of new vehicles paying on average $8,249 per year in the Peach State. Georgia ranks near the top for average vehicle taxes, the cost of full coverage for auto insurance, and the cost of maintenance, according to Bankrate. Article continues, Georgia has relatively low pump prices per gallon, but because Georgians drive so much, given long commutes and a relative lack of transit, the Peach State also ranks near the top in the average fuel costs for auto owners. Georgians drive on average more than 17,500 miles per year, much higher than the national average, Bankrate found. Many consumers start their car hunt knowing their budget for a loan or a lease payment, but often aren't as well informed about other costs such as insurance, fuel, and maintenance, according to Shannon Martin, a Bankrate insurance analyst, saying, there are a lot of other costs that go into owning a car. Well, thank you, ma'am. We're learning it's $8,200 on average per year in the state of Georgia. Bankrate found in the article here that the average annual hidden cost for Georgia drivers is nearly double that for drivers in New Hampshire at $42.99 per year, the state with the lowest hidden expenses. Nationwide, the average hidden cost of car ownership is $6,684 per year, according to Bankrate. By the way, in case you're wondering, since we were number one, or the worst, who's right behind us? Indiana, Louisiana, that tracks. I lived in Louisiana 5 years. The roads there are terrible. I have to imagine just the maintenance cost. That's got to be something that Louisiana surpasses us with. Florida at number 4, Nevada at number 5. When we look at insurance coverage, Georgia is 13th. Fuel costs, Georgia is 4th. And again, that's not the pump price. That's the pump price and the amount of mileage that we drive, necessitating us going back to the pump. Maintenance costs, here we go. Wyoming at number 1, Indiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Georgia 5th. Okay, so we actually are ahead of Louisiana with its poor roads. Although Louisiana's poor roads are mostly confined to south of Interstate 10, where the state is almost literally sliding into the Gulf of Mexico as the land degrades and the swamp takes over. The thing is, we sort of always have this red v. blue, city versus rural or even suburban mindset when it comes to even discussing transit. I'm trying to remember what it was. There was something on Twitter I was following a few days ago where there was a discussion about, was it MARTA? It was MARTA funding. Well, I think it had something to do with MARTA funding. Georgia gives MARTA nothing. the Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, MARTA. The state of Georgia, the Department of Transportation, gives not one dime to MARTA. It is the largest mass transit authority in the country, not to get state funding. So MARTA has to rely on what is called fare box, the fares collected from riders, and money from Fulton to Cab, City of Atlanta, I think City of Decatur. And that's really about it. MARTA is woefully inefficient for handling Metro Atlanta transit because most of even Metro Atlanta doesn't contribute to Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. Cobb County doesn't. They've had a referendum. Gwinnett County doesn't. They've, too, had a referendum. It's my understanding there's another one coming soon, or at least another swipe at it. There's very little funding outside of the City of Atlanta, DeKalb, and Fulton County that go to Metro Atlanta's Rapid Transit Authority. And that should be addressed at some point in time. But again, the state legislature, it becomes a blue v red sort of thing. And I was following this Twitter thread, Darren Givens, Eric Phillips, I follow them all the time. It was Eric Phillips, he had tweeted that the state not funding transit is such a concern that we approved an increase in sales taxes to fund the transit ourselves. He's using much more colorful language in this tweet than I am. And he's right. We had to, inside MARTA's footprint, agree to a sales tax increase so that MARTA could expand. And then COVID came, and then the supply chain issues came, and inflation came, and most of the money that MARTA, accrued, actually, because of some of the, costs associated with the pandemic and sheltering in place and, just money withering away with all of those costs and inflation, MARTA says, so all those projects we said we were going to do, we're only going to be able to do like a percentage, like a quarter or half or something like that, I forget. But nonetheless, those who live within MARTA's footprint are like, fine, we want these projects, we need to get them done, let's get them done. And one of them, I've talked about this all the time on the show, Beltline Rail. Anyway, this guy chimed in and was essentially like, why should the rest of the state of Georgia have to fund for Atlanta's transit needs? Well, that's, to me, kind of ignorant. And I literally responded. I said, because Georgia's taxpayers outside the city have been roughing up Atlanta's roads and bridges for decades with hardly a notable, measurable contribution to maintain them. Not even accounting for the white flight that abandoned them for a suppressed economic base to have to care for those roads. Because Atlanta is the economic engine of the state, because Atlanta's mass transit is the largest such authority in the nation not to get a dime of state money already. And why, can I ask, do you not ask about the Georgia DOT laying another lane on our interstate highways or building another geometric wonder of an interchange along I-285? But if someone utters MARTA and GOT funding, the OTP population outside the perimeter, folk howl like scalded dogs. It isn't just Atlanta that needs stronger MARTA. It's the state and its economic viability that needs it. On top of that, it's past time, honestly, to start talking about passenger rail connecting Atlanta to Macon and Statesboro, Kennesaw, Athens, Columbus, Augusta, Chattanooga, Savannah, etc., and so on. Rail rarely asks for another lane to fix overcrowding and doesn't need the coin to maintain the rail quite the way that Georgia DOT, hardly anyone complains about, sopping up taxpayer dollars does. This isn't just an Atlanta situation, by the way. I mean, Atlanta's a top 10 city now when you look at population metro area. Top 5 when it comes to growth. This is a problem a lot of cities of any size or substance has to deal with. And again, Americans, I just ask, what happened to the romantic notion of the open road and freedom and your car, your favorite car? I mean, I love my Mazda. I love my Mazda 6, and she's got little dents and dings here and there, and God bless her, I've got to get new rims at some point in time when I can afford to, and the tires are just, because these streets are mean, man. And being on them all the time, it's hard on the old girl. I love my Mazda. I named her the Marvelous Ms. Mazda. Miriam, Midge. And yet I'm just watching as the roads take its toll on her. And it makes me sad. It really does. It really does. I'm not being facetious. But this isn't just like a blue v red sort of thing either. This is also a leadership problem, a vision problem that we have inside the perimeter, inside Atlanta city limits, inside City Hall, inside the mayor's office, and between the mayor's ears. Hear why I raise those concerns when you allow me just a second to get another coffee. Back after this. The Ron Show on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. The Ron Show, by the way, is brought to you by whatever coffee I have in my Keurig drawer. If you'd like to contribute to the Keurig drawer, essentially I'm asking if you'd like to donate to the show. You can do so at ronshowatl.com. This is, by the way, a venture that mostly comes out of my pocket. I don't get paid for this. You don't hear commercials within the show itself. Anyway, ronshowatl.com, and the donate tab is right there for you. Thank you. So, mass transit. We were talking about the hidden cost of owning a car in the state of Georgia, having a car in the state of Georgia, and we're all sort of sentenced to it. As kids, we thought, oh, it'd be great to have our own car. And then you get our own car, and you're like, you got to take your kid to practice, or your kid's sister to practice. You got to do this, you got to do that, run errands for mom, dad. It starts to sink in right then and there. Wait a minute. I thought this was all supposed to be fun. And then as you're an adult, you're like, sitting in traffic, this f***ing sucks. Why did I be about sucks? Anyway, in Atlanta, we're at this pivotal moment in our region's history where we're at a crossroads. We know we're continuing to grow population-wise. The city is starting to infill again. Gentrification has taken hold. The Beltline development has made inner city neighborhoods attractive for new residents and home buyers. I am a real estate agent, by the way. Hit me up. 404-919-2725 is the show number. So we're starting to realize, oh my God, we really don't have good enough roads, and we really don't have enough highway mileage laneage. Another lane ought to do it. But we also don't have enough mass transit. And the ability for me to live where I live and walk to Kroger, come back, that's fine. I can dart over Ponce to TJ Maxx if I need to, get a little something. Walk back on a nice day, it's great. When it's not nice or too hot or rainy, it's not so much. That's where light rail would be nice. So the Beltline as a concept all along had Beltline rail built into it in the mind of Ryan Gravel, the birther, the father of the Atlanta Beltline, so to speak. And while the Beltline is nearly complete, the Beltline rail was, I guess, supposed to come much later. I don't know why it wasn't, apportioned in pieces the way the Beltline has been, but that's the case. And the Atlanta streetcar, that really goes nowhere. It was kind of a poor spot to put this, but maybe the idea was let's show them what it'll look like, what it'll run like. Anyway, now it's a political football. And you would think that the mayor of the city, crushed by suburban traffic and out of state, out of metro traffic all the time, especially during peak tourism season, you would think he would be chomping at the bit to get Beltline rail accomplished so that folks that live in the city can at least avoid having to be in that traffic to get to and from their grocery stores, their jobs, if they live inside the perimeter and work inside the perimeter, to just kind of get around easily. Well, Mayor Dickens, who I think considers himself a visionary, has become less of a visionary when it comes to Beltline rail. He was on WABE's Closer Look with Rose Scott a few days ago, and she brought up transit. They were talking a lot about housing for the first half hour of this 50-minute conversation. They were talking about housing, and that's a huge issue, no doubt about it. But transit is part of the housing conundrum. So she brought it up.
I want you to answer this as the mayor of Atlanta and as a regular resident and citizen of Atlanta. Okay, Mayor Dickens, are you in favor and will you push for light rail on the Beltline?
This is a simple question, a yes-no question. Do we get a yes-no answer?
My answer to that is consistently yes. I'm in favor of it,
all right.
And yes, I'm pushing for it.
Good.
Some people got misconstrued about 6 months ago when I talked about we need to do the analysis. Mm-hmm. the last time anybody, there's not a single soul in the city of Atlanta, even the ones that yell and type real fast that they hate certain things.
I get those emails.
Yeah. They type real fast.
Yeah.
They know Twitter, they know Facebook, they know Instagram. They talk a lot, but they couldn't tell you, even with a calculator, how much it would cost. They can't tell you. They won't tell you how much it costs to construct. They can't tell you how much it would cost to operate. They can't tell you how burdensome it would be to put it in, how much it would cost the businesses. I mean, we had a water situation that lasted 2 days, and I put $7.5 million in the hands of small businesses. Imagine constructing a light rail on the Beltline right now. I would have to come up with a summary of how to deal with the challenges with that.
See, this is another one of those cases where we have to ask, does anybody do a cost-benefit analysis or what the city should be paying businesses when a road gets closed for repaving or reconstruction or widening? No, they don't do that. Why is it any different with rail expansion or mass transit at all? Got to take a quick break. We'll pick right up with that conversation and eavesdrop some more on the mayor's discussion on Beltline Rail when we return.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So today I decided I want to dive into the hidden cost of owning a vehicle, the misery that it is sitting in traffic. And this is not, again, just an Atlanta-centric thing, although I'm diving in on an Atlanta-centric solution that is being bogged down in some Atlanta way-like doublespeak and NIMBYism. Atlanta's not unlike many other major cities that aren't Chicago and New York or Boston that have DC, let me throw that in too. Good, if not great, metro mass transit. Even San Francisco, Oakland, Bay Area, rapid transit. Good network. You can get a lot of places in the San Francisco, Oakland metropolitan area thanks to mass transit. Atlanta, not so much. We have the limitations of MARTA. We have the plane train. We have the little trains that take you from the parking lots of the airport to the airport. And then we have like a cobbling of bus lines. And MARTA, with its funding, it's going to do some bus lanes for buses only to make driving the streets and highways even more miserable for the rest of us, while not really addressing the needs of mass transit in and around Metro Atlanta. So if you don't live in Atlanta, I realize that I'm diving into a pretty Atlanta-specific situation, but apply this to the city or metro area that you live in and ask yourself, would some form of mass transit, and I'm not just talking about buses, I'm talking about like light rail, would some form of mass transit benefit your city? And why would mass transit only be confined to major cities in the first place? Honestly, a major city without any mass transit, yes, there are going to be some huge expenses. But for a city like Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Madison, Wisconsin, I'm just naming off mid-sized American. Omaha. Omaha's a pretty sizable city, actually. Why not start thinking about connecting where people live to where people go on the regular? Kansas City wants to build a new downtown baseball stadium. There's supposed to be a rail element to that, and somehow that kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Although the public tax dollars for that ballpark, that's not getting lost. Even in my hometown, I grew up outside Augusta, Georgia. There's no conversation about anything like this. And I have to ask why. Why not? The little city that I grew up in, Grovetown, had about 3,500 residents when I lived there. It's bloomed to well over 10,000 now. Hell, might be closer to 20. Traffic constantly snarls that city with its 2-lane road main street connecting Fort Gordon to the town, through the town, essentially to Interstate 20. And then you've got the other street that takes you perpendicular into and out of the city, it to a 2-lane road. And so they're going to have to buy up some houses and tear them down and widen the roads eventually so that hopefully that'll solve a problem that it exists already, that they're already 5 years, if not more, behind on dealing with. And by the way, the little town I grew up in, Grovetown, used to have passenger rail into and out of the city back in the day. The Picayune used to literally take people from Thompson, Georgia to Harlem, Campania, Harlem, Grovetown, Martinez, on into Augusta. We had mass transit. A lot of this country had mass transit before the horseless carriage came about. It's not even like visionary or to think like the Jetsons' future or Star Trek or anything like that. We can look back to the past and go, well, that seemed to really work for us back then. Why don't we do it more? And we don't have to have the coal-churning, massive locomotive engines, destroying our lung capacity anymore either. It is 2024. We can do these things without tearing up more earth and expanding highways and giving more ground to polluting vehicles. Mayor Andre Dickens here in Atlanta with his Atlanta unique conundrum is the mayor of a city who has seen the Atlanta Beltline, a connection of the city's neighborhoods with a perimeter of this massive sidewalk essentially right now. And on the east side, we've seen a lot of businesses spring up alongside it because it connects where people live to parks and retail and food destinations. Great. A lot of businesses now, this is the NIMBYism coming in, and residents, a lot of businesses and residents that have popped up along the Beltline now. This is like our beachfront property in Atlanta, by the way. All of a sudden, like, I don't think we want this rail thing. I don't know what they think is coming. They must think it's like a freight train that's going to come past them all the time. That's the best I can do. Sorry. And yet the streetcar is about as quiet as it gets. If you're walking around downtown Atlanta and you try to cross the street, near a street, you better be looking because it's going to sneak up on you. Mayor Dickens was on A Closer Look with Rose Scott on the local NPR station, one of them anyway, WABE, and he was talking about being for or against Beltline Rail. She asked him flat out, are you for or against it? And he goes, yes, ... but. And he starts talking about the cost and yada, yada, yada. What it's going to cost businesses to construct the thing, et cetera, and so on. And I agree, yeah, there are going to be some pains, as there are when you widen a street or close a street to pave it. Nobody thinks about that. Nobody's concerned about the impact on people or businesses. Atlanta's one of those few cities, by the way, that will let somebody build a building, and instead of having to use scaffolding and staying within the footprint of the property that they're building on, oh, fine. Would you like to close for a block a lane of Spring Street? By all means, go for it. Please, I know, have at it. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with that. We'll do that, but the economy, business. I don't understand that line of questioning. The folks at Beltline Rail now, by the way, did respond with some answers to Mayor Dickens' questions, but I want to go back to some of the questions that he wanted to pose as well.
So going back to the first two answers to the two questions you asked me, am I in favor? Yes. Am I committed to pushing it? Yes. But am I sober and fiscally responsible and somebody who takes every job, every decision I make very seriously? I don't have to type real fast to do what everybody else is doing on the internet, saying, get the Beltline Rail now. Right, I'm saying, because I got to live with the situation of, yes, go for it, and we can't pay for it. Yes, go for it, and we can't operate it. Yes, go for it, and it's going to cost millions or billions to small businesses while it's under construction. So we have to calculate that. So then I go to the right places to get those dollars to do it, or get the patience to be able to endure it as it's happening.
Any idea in terms of the dollars then? Because then this goes to an Andre Dickens who's a resident, who's a citizen. I'm waiting for the Beltline because then maybe a transit, because I can get from here to there, maybe get a better job. For those individuals who say light rail could really change my household because I'll be able to get from one side without taking MARTA and waiting for the bus.
Or spending $80 $200 a year extra in owning a vehicle. Speaking of costs.
Yeah.
So what's that number then for that individual?
So we are in the process of doing that. We have hired
He doesn't know.
engineering firms, for lack of a better word, consulting firms, to go out there and do the cost analysis of those things that I just mentioned. How much it will cost to construct it for the 22-mile loop or some version of that, whether it's, sometimes it may not follow exactly along the exact belt line because there's some difficult points on the belt line to get a train next to that. Look at how much it would cost if we were to do light rail, bus rapid transit, pods, which are like these glorified golf carts, autonomous things, and any other form of mobility, to look at the cost of operating it as well. You don't want to ride the Beltline if it's going to cost you $25 a mile, a ride, et cetera. And we are still in a state that does not fund its public transit.
That's right.
We have New York hopes of transit, but New York State supports the New York transit system. Illinois supports the Chicago transit system, et cetera, et cetera. BART is, in the Bay Area in San Francisco, is supported by California. We do not have support for MARTA, nor will we have support for the Beltline as it currently stands. So it's all at the fare box. It's literally everything that you pay will operate that service. So therefore, that's why I'm going to Murphy's Crossing, which will be the very first new infield transit station in the city's history.
An infield station,
it'll be an infield
not a
station.
full MARTA station.
No, it'll be a MARTA station.
It'll be a full MARTA
They call
station?
it infield because
It's in between
It's in between.
Okay.
It'll be in between a station. It'll be the first one on the Beltline.
Okay.
So you will basically ride MARTA from the world's busiest airport, and your first stop to get to the Beltline will be Murphy's Crossing Station, which is going to be transit-oriented development as well as a MARTA station.
What I didn't hear the mayor talk about is lobbying the state legislature to finally step up and offer that state funding. Are you doing that, Mr. Mayor? And I love the idea of folks getting off a plane, getting on MARTA, going to the first infill station that he wants to build at Murphy Crossing, and then voila, you're on the Beltline. Okay, cool. If we had Beltline rail that would actually connect there, that you could take to other parts of the city that MARTA doesn't go to, that you may need to go to, say you live there, or say your aunt and uncle are coming to visit, and you say, hey, listen, if you just take MARTA, get off at Murphy Crossing and take the Beltline rail in the third stop, you'll be 2 blocks from my house. I'll meet you there. You don't have to drive to the airport now. They don't have to catch an Uber or a Lyft. Again, hidden costs. Beltline Rail Now, folks, had some answers to some of his questions. And I'll share this in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Glaringly absent in the mayor's Beltline Transit comments was any mention of why Beltline Rail is a good idea. The vision of Beltline Light Rail as an ambitious citywide redevelopment project unrivaled by any other project in the nation in its potential to transform a city. That a full Beltline light rail loop is a one-time investment to supercharge upward mobility and provide access to all Atlantans in a way no other transit project can. That the mayor's priorities of affordable housing and mobility for the city's residents, which he discussed during the Rose Scott interview but didn't connect to transit, can best be delivered through Beltline Rail. Let's look at affordability. It's well known that the permanence of a rail project is an asset. That affordability follows rail in a way it simply doesn't follow bus rapid transit or autonomous vehicles or pods. I can't believe he's saying that anybody who's against Beltline Rail would be for buses alongside the Beltline or pods. Back to the Beltline Rail response, and that permanence of rail will be an asset in the economic development of the sections on the Beltline, the south and southwest parts of the trail in particular, that have historically suffered from lack of investment and development. Affordable housing, as the mayor said, is meant to be spread all around the Beltline and elsewhere in Atlanta, making the direct connection to high-capacity transit for residents who live in affordable units all the more pressing. It's not affordable if car ownership is needed, and it's not desirable life if it means living too far away from a job and the city's amenities. Later in that conversation on WABE, I'll give that to you in the show notes as well, ronshowatl.com. Rose Scott asked, did we miss the boat? Should we have been doing light rail all along? That's what I believe. And Mayor Dickens chose not to Monday morning quarterback because he was not mayor at the time. he chose not to Monday morning quarterback. But I want you to hear what he had to say about what the White House thinks about the Beltline. Notably, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg.
It is phenomenal to even have what we have right now with the Beltline. When I'm at the White House talking to Pete Buttigieg and others, they're like, this is amazing. This is the largest infrastructure project in the state of Georgia right now.
I don't even know that I would call it infrastructure so much as, like I said, I mean, it's nice. It's nice to have this huge pedestrian mall that encircles the city, but all along, as he points out in this podcast, Ryan Gravel's vision was to have the rail element in the first place. Listen to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, along with Senator John Ossoff, back in May of 2021, talking about the need for mass transit expansion in Atlanta and the Beltline rail.
MARTA has big plans for expansion, from the vision for potentially adding streetcars along the Beltline to the announcement recently that MARTA was going to support affordable housing along their routes. The people of this city have stepped up in 2016, voting for a half-cent sales tax to support MARTA's expansion, because voters understand that investing in transit pays off and creates jobs. Now, we got to make sure that we're doing that as a country, too.
71% of Atlanta residents, by the way, approved that sales tax increase for MARTA expansion, which included Beltline rail. At that same press event, Senator John Ossoff also spoke.
Yesterday and today, the Secretary has made clear his commitment to the vital infrastructure projects that we must invest in and accelerate immediately, from MARTA's expansion to the completion of the Beltline and the addition of light rail to the Beltline to the completion. This is truly a generational opportunity. We can leave a mark that will last for a century. We can look back on this moment in our country's history as the moment when we determined to make investments that take our quality of life to the next level, that sustain equitable economic growth, that help people across this country and communities across Georgia get around more affordably, and live lives that allow them to achieve their dreams, reach their highest potentials.
And as far as the funding part goes, I have to ask, Mayor Dickens, are you aware how many senior citizens, by the way, spend $25, $30, $35, whatever the monthly fee is, to have unlimited Lyft or Uber transportation? And how much of that money, first of all, how much of that money exists in Metro Atlanta that could instead be going to unlimited ridership on mass transit if the mass transit actually served the needs of those senior citizens who are instead spending whatever it is, $25, $30, $35 a month, I forget what it is, to have unlimited Uber or Lyft pickup. I mean, if we're going to sit here and hand-wring about, what it's going to cost the business, and why, I don't understand why the city of Atlanta feels compelled to write a check to businesses who are going to be inconvenienced by the construction of Beltline rail in the first place. We don't do that for other businesses. You know what? I'll go off on that rant again, and I think I already did that. I just feel like if we're going to have cost-benefit analysis, we should put all the money on the table that you're missing out on, that you think is going to be an expenditure, and, of course, the $8,300 a year that state residents spend just for owning a vehicle. Back after this. All right, just a few more minutes on my rant that seems, if you are a fan of Mayor Andre Dickens, unfair. You may think, why are you going so hard after Mayor Dickens? It's just that I don't think that when it comes to mass transit, Beltline rail notable here, that he's really doing all that he can, and he's not using this bully pulpit that he has as the mayor of the major city, the linchpin of the metropolitan area, the economic engine of the state. I don't think he's using this bully pulpit to do what's necessary. We can complain about the money problems, what it'll cost to do what he needs done. But as the folks at the Beltline rail site point out, you got to ask for the money to get it. And so far, other cities have collectively received more than $15 billion from Secretary Buttigieg, while Atlanta has received less than $100 million, none of it for rail projects. They continue, growing the funding pie is the recipe for success. This could mean a combination of federal funding and another SSD or T-SPLOST, a special purpose local option sales tax. I would say no. It means private sector involvement. It will definitely mean some creativity, but it all flows from the decision to move forward with Beltline rail, they write. And they're right. They're absolutely right. You can't give mixed messages. You can't send mixed signals. Because even the Secretary Buttigiegs of the world are going to be like, well, wait, you're going to, if I give you this money, you're going to use it for that, right? Because they're already seeing that, well, we already have the one special purpose local option sales tax that local residents passed, and you guys kind of waffled on that. So before I write this check, is this what you're going to use it for? And also, Beltline rail people, this is where I would also say to you, let me finish their article and see if they mentioned it. I don't think they did. No, I don't see it. Go to the state. Oh my God, go to the state, for crying out loud. It's time to go to the state. We still, to my recollection, not have a drop of coinage from the state for the water situation. And those who live outside the city of Atlanta would go, well, why should we have to cough up some money for that? Because a lot of folks who live outside the city of Atlanta tax our infrastructure, and our water is part of our infrastructure. They burden our infrastructure without contributing to the maintenance of it. A lot of your parents and grandparents who once maybe lived in the city of Atlanta and then fled for whatever reason in the 20th century, left behind an infrastructure and a collapsed economy because of it that needed maintaining. And I'm not saying that the state has to foot the entire bill, but how about contributing? We all know, we hear this all the time, especially, God, you can't watch the news without all the drug commercials. A healthy heart makes for a healthy body, a healthy mind. Atlanta is the heart of the state, and it has to pump. It has to pump. It has to pump routinely and regularly, and the blood flow. Atlanta is the heart of the state. And if we let our gridlock slow that pumping, eventually the body starts to suffer. The state starts to suffer. Again, a lot of you don't live in the city of Atlanta that listen to this show, Progressive Voices via TuneIn, the American One Radio app. You may live in other parts of the country, maybe even other parts of the world. But I actually think that this is a conversation that a lot of cities of any size need to start having conversations about. Who was I talking to the other day? I used to live in Marietta, Georgia, which is a community north of Atlanta, and how terrible the traffic is in and around downtown Marietta. Marietta is a city of some size, right? It's the largest city, I think, in Cobb County. Still, is it? Maybe Mableton now. Anyway, Marietta is a city of some size, some substance. Cobb County has no mass transit. Marietta has no mass transit. They have buses, but they don't have mass transit the way we think of mass transit. Marietta needs to do something. Anyway, this is a conversation to carry wherever you're going is my point. But I will point out, for those of you who live in and around Metro Atlanta and enjoy the Beltline, but believe that the Beltline rail element of the Beltline is so important, there is going to be a rally. Saturday morning, 9:30 at 912 Wiley Street. The nonprofit group Beltline Rail Now will unfurl a new banner at the rally, which will be held, again, 912 Wiley Street, Reynoldstown, Atlanta. Atlanta City Council President Doug Shipman, a proponent of Beltline Rail, expected to address attendees. And I guarantee you, he's not going to waffle in conversation. I guarantee the messaging is not going to be, we need to have this, but ... This is not where I, by the way, pivot to say Doug Shipman should run for. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that city leadership, civic leadership that says yes to Beltline Rail shouldn't follow with but. They should follow with, and I'm committed to finding ways ... so that you don't give oxygen to the fire beneath for those in the NIMBYist mindset who have, come in and enjoyed the Beltline and seen their property values increase alongside it, but also now are all of a sudden, they don't want to be temporarily inconvenienced with the construction of what will be fantastic for them and their business and their neighbors and the city on the whole. Don't give it oxygen, Mayor. That's all I'm saying. All right, that's going to do it for today's Ron Show. Again, very Atlanta-centric. That happens from time to time if you're new to the show. Progressive Voices via TuneIn. But as I said before, I think sometimes these are conversations to have wherever you live. Visions to have wherever you live. Okay, back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. and 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio, 7 to 8 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn or wherever you podcast. And show notes available, as always, at RonShowATL.com. Have a great day.